I go even farther than that. I don't just want performance now. I want to be able to use any language, have any setup, have direct access from my database directly into the hardware. The reason why we are the fastest is because we actually rely on the browser to do its job. The fastest thing you can do is not do JavaScript. So don't do JavaScript.
So Delaney, tell me a little bit about how you started programming, how you got into programming.
My journey into programming was much later than almost every audience member that you probably have. I didn't get started really heavy programming until my early 20s. Like, I just had many other things going on in my life, and I didn't need to program. So it was like, that was a thing for like the super nerds. I was like, no, I'm good. Definitely was a late bloomer compared to most of the people that you talk to.
You said you didn't need to program as if this was a chore. Not, it's often like, oh, it's my passion.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is that when because I'm a little bit older than most people that you talk to, when I was, programming was kind of like you get a book at the library and you read some basic or something like that. Like, you'd read it through and be like, okay, like, yeah, that's fun to put into a prompt one or two times, but it wasn't really, like, it wasn't fun to make games. It wasn't fun to really explore the stuff, and I didn't have anything around me at the time. Like, I was from the middle of nowhere, Wyoming, so there's only a few programming books, and I would read through them and be like, okay, I don't have access to a computer, but I can read through them and say, okay, I can play this game. Okay, I'm going to go do something interesting. Like, it didn't really discover the joy of programming until much, much later. So,
what did you do in the early 20s before programming?
So, I have kind of a weird background. I actually was in the circus for a long time, which is not normal. I know people talk about going off to join the circus, but I actually did it. And that helped me. I moved to Vegas doing that kind of stuff. And then after doing that for years, started doing 3D art and started making slot machine games and stuff like that, and then got into programming after the fact. Okay. So I've had kind of a weird kind of roller coaster way to get into programming, not the normal thing. So
when you finally got into programming, what actually kicked this off?
So the thing that really made me get into programming heavily is I was a 3D artist, and I would constantly be like, because you're basically living in a sandbox that someone else made for you, right? Like, you only get the tools that someone else makes for you. And I would ask for a plugin or try to say, hey, I really want to do X. Or there's a Photoshop thing, like there's a thing called ActionScript that you can use to build up automated tools. So I started getting into the thing of like, hey, how lazy can I be if a lot of this stuff is just moving things around in different layers. I worked on slot machines and stuff, and most of that is around certain templates that you build up in Photoshop for the different cells and everything. It can be hundreds of layers deep. So it's like, well, how do I automate some of this process? And that got deep into the weeds of like, hey, there's got to be a better way to do this, and started getting deeper. Like, ActionScript is not the best programming language to learn. So I had done some basic and stuff, like basic and stuff. The thing that actually got me really, I think, more hardcore after doing the ActionScript stuff is I was a heavy user of Blender even in the early 2000s when it first came out as open source. And that was all written in C with a Python binding on top. Maya, Nuke, all these other tools have Python binding. So I would say that like my two introductions were Python and C, and even the Python I wrote was very tied to C. As a language. So the Python that I would write would not get approved by a normal Python dev. It was basically C in Python's clothing. So okay. That's kind of where my introduction to programming started, for sure.
Okay. Hi everyone. Let me take a break to thank members of the show who made this conversation possible. Members get earlier access to videos, including longer unedited footage from live streams, as well as they're invited to our private Discord server. If you want to support this show, there is no better way than becoming a member on YouTube or Patreon. Thank you so much. And then you started working professionally as a programmer.
Yeah, so the thing is that I basically just transitioned from, hey, I'm building all these, doing all this 3D art, to, hey, I'm building all these tools for other artists. Hey, I want to start integrating with the engine stuff because, like, they're not making tools for the artists. And then you just get farther down the weed of, like, as Mike Acton always says, the problem is the problem. And, like, is the problem in the art tools or the pipeline, or like where in the stack is it? So you just start working the whole stack to really solve the problem. So then I got really heavy into doing engineering stuff. And the irony is that most of the time I would be much more comfortable in like GLSL shaders or something like that, because they tie directly to like the graphic side of it more so than like a bunch of abstractions and things above it, which, you know, I think most people have gone through that thing of like being told, hey, I was doing a bunch of GLSL and that kind of thing, and then saying, hey, if you want to be a real programmer, you have to do all these object-oriented stuff and all these levels above it. And it was very confusing for a very long time.
So how did you get escape this?
So the thing is that I don't know. Part of the thing is that I'm always trying to just like work on interesting problems and solving things. And my thing was like, I just started seeing how fast things could be if you just take away steps. I thought there was something clever to being a programmer, and most of the time it has to do with like big dumb buffers, things that you can read it linearly, and like maybe merge sort, or like there's radix sort. There's a couple of things that you have to really know, but I thought there was more to it than that for the longest time, and then you realize, no, that's kind of what it is at a certain level, and everything else is this weird abstraction on top of it that not only complicates it, but it makes just worse code. It's one of those weird things that you can make something simple and easier to use. That's the part that's weird to me. Like it can be faster and simpler, and that goes against most things, right? Like you don't think that that's possible. So I think that's one of those things is like not caring what people say and going like, okay, you say we should do all this, but my way is X faster and uses this much memory and this GC and like does all these things. Okay, now what? Like show me your way being better than this. And that's been an interesting change for me, is like just not arguing, just being like, okay, here's my numbers, happy to do it your way, please beat this, right? And that tends to stop the conversation pretty quickly. Okay,
I have one last question on this thread, but we can come back.
Sure.
And like, because already in the opinion corner, why do you think those people say these things then? Like, if you can have programs that are simpler and faster, why would you go and build, these abstractions and like architect systems and whatever? Like, what's the reason?
I feel very strongly that I have a good definition of why that happens. It's because if you solve the actual problem, like you're dealing with the data, right? Always, at least in every project I've ever worked on, data is the problem. It's not the code that's the problem. It's understanding how to transform the data or how to filter the data or make it work in an efficient way. It's always about the data. And the problem is that once you get into the data, it's very hard to abstract out. It's very hard to think conceptually. It's very hard to like say, well, we might need this later. Oh, like I have opinions about this. Like you can't really have too many opinions about like this data transformation has to turn into this data transformation. And so it's just work. Like you just have to take the thing from A and turn it into B. And it's not fun to most people. Like they don't like the idea of like engineering is about solving the problem that you have in front of you. They like the idea of being an architect and like thinking in these abstract concepts and like, oh, we'll have this layer of abstraction factory pattern, impl pattern factory manager, right? In some ways that's more fun. It feels like you're like crafting something as a wizard as opposed to just a guy like shoveling manure. Like that's just like, but that's the job. That's the actual job of being an engineer with software. Like just embrace it and like enjoy, like imagine Sisyphus is happy. I don't know. Like that's
where maybe we can talk a little bit about your experience before we talk about Datastar. Do you want to highlight some of the companies you work for and like projects that you've done, sort of where your experience come from and formed this type of thinking that you have now?
Sure. So I've worked on a lot of different things. Like for example, I stayed in because I was in Vegas from doing the shows and stuff. And I ended up working on slot machine games. So it was slot machine games are interesting because even the artwork gets heavily regulated. Like you can only say certain things. You can't like target kids by accident or anything. Like there's all kinds of rules around this that you wouldn't think of about art. So thinking about regulatory stuff for slot machines, but still thinking about efficiency of making games was an interesting challenge because you would probably have hundreds of titles under my name because you just are pumping stuff out constantly, right? So thinking about regulatory stuff kind of got me down the road of thinking about efficiencies, regulatory stuff, and visualization got me into doing some military stuff. So for a while there, I had a clearance doing military stuff. And one of the projects that I've mentioned before in the past is I had a project where we were showing every radar blip from every radar station in the continental United States, and we wanted to show it in a web app with less than like 800 milliseconds of delay. And so you'd be able to see 1 million blips on your screen of the entire continental United States and be able to search any point in the last hour of history of that data. So that's the kind of problems that I was like, oh, I can do it on the web. I can do it. Because one thing that's interesting about the military space is that the web is a great platform because it's sandboxed, because people don't get access to the whole machine. It's this little ecosystem that you can really lock things down. And the idea of hypermedia means that you're not creating new versions. You're not trying to update them. There's a whole process you have to go through to get things signed off on. Like it's a whole thing to get a new executable signed off on. But if it's hypermedia, you can just send down, the results. So I got really deep into GLSL and WebGL and building apps that way, and it sent me down the whole thing of like working on bigger, there's problems in this, but yet the web is this amazing platform. Like it's kind of a dichotomy of like the way the web is right now sucks, but the actual web constructs and the spec and stuff is amazing. So I'm of two wolves. I both love the web and I hate the web at the same time. And yeah, that led me to, I was doing a bunch of stuff with visualization, and then that led me to start working at Sane on Nats, which is a messaging platform that does all kinds of amazing things for connecting integrated systems. So it's kind of like the web, but on the other side, after you get like inside of your internal systems. So if you're having internal systems talk to each other, share schemas, key value stores, object, like all these ideas of interconnecting the web. So I just like solving hard problems, and that's kind of led me to have a kind of a weird career. So I worked in the military, I've done like games, and now I work on messaging stuff. So kind of all over the place.
To pick up on the thread of like web as a deployment platform, this is super cool. Like, and this is one of the reasons why web blew up compared to like the desktop apps, right? Like you can immediately send an application to somebody saying, hey, type this URL. And like, you're not afraid typing the URL that like all your credit data will be stolen from whatever the file you had downloaded somewhere on your disk. So this is super cool. And, we can maybe then translate to Datastar a little bit, because I'm assuming Datastar is your answer to make the web development more sane.
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, it's funny because when I get into Twitter fights and stuff with other JS framework devs and stuff like that, and the irony is I don't even see myself as a web person, let alone a JS framework person. To me, it's just a tool to solve the problem. My thing is more that the people that listen to your podcast, because I'm one of them, the people that listen to this care about performance and they care about like lower level details. And to me, the fact that there was a thing that a little while ago where Casey Murray was talking about like, oh yeah, the web, I don't care about the web. Or he was talking about Node.js being like, this is a nightmare. And it's like, yeah, what you did there is a nightmare. This has nothing to do with the web. It's the ecosystem of like just bad developers that has made this weird situation where the fact that Casey doesn't care about the web makes me very sad. Like I know him I remember downloading his video on immediate mode back in like 2002, 2003, and it took like 2 hours to get the video, and I had to go to work because I was like, oh, it's like a 50 meg video. Like I want to watch this content. So it's one of those things of seeing how much that people care about low-level C and C++ and about doing the right things in that space, and yet they think that the web, just none of this is possible. And it's like, no, if you actually care, you can do crazy things that make everyone else look like amateurs, and that's bad. Like, so that's the weird thing. Is it's not that Datastar, which we can get into as much detail as you want, it's not that it's good. It's that the state of the industry right now is so completely devoid of understanding mechanical sympathy that I don't even know. Like it makes me almost angry to talk about because there's no reason that some circus guy should be able to make the fastest framework. That doesn't make sense.
The void of mechanical sympathy. Wow, that's such a beautiful way to put it. Nice.
Well, you know what's interesting is that it's actually, I'm not the best with words. I'm better with like when I'm on stage, like because I did a trick roping and gun spinning and knife throwing. I did a bunch of cowboy stuff. I'm originally from Wyoming, and like that's what I did for my act. And like get me on stage with like some guns or like equipment that can cause harm. I'm all for it, but just give me a laptop, and I'm a very bad speaker. But you know who is a good speaker? You've had on I think a couple times, like Ryan Fleury, young, like super smart guy, crazy smart. He wrote a really good blog about the marketplace of ideals and how basically like how Handmade Hero became like people didn't like it because not because of the actual content, but because it was abrasive and it was like pointing the finger at like, no, you can actually be better. And how softening that kind of loses the point, kind of loses the thread. And so the problem is I think the web is in such more dire straits than the native app people, right? Because when you're in a native app, even if you try to be bad at it, you're still better than most websites. Right? So the irony is that because the web, you can do so much and do so much in scripting and stuff, you have to be more thoughtful, to me, to make a good app there than you do as a native app developer.
So tell me, why do you think there's this split? You know, I have this podcast and often I have people on, and as you mentioned, like it's very common that people, for example, like Ryan has done some web development stuff, and it's like it's not like to pinpoint, but like obviously his like preference is C and desktop application and like hardcore use of performance and resources you have in your PC. And then if you were to switch to like there's this barrier, you know, and on the other hand there are people that are like web dev concerned, and if they come to the desktop application, they would do something like, yeah, it's like a script, so I don't really care about the usage of resources. So it's like there are these two camps, and there's like this invisible wall between them. It's so difficult. You're one of the few people that are like, I want performance on both places, and I want it now. You know, like it's so difficult. Why?
Yeah, I go even farther than that. I don't just want performance now. I want to be able to use any language, have any setup, like have direct access from my database directly into like the hardware. Like I want it to be a deep integration, and the irony is that it's already there. I think the thing that's happened is that it was one of those things of evolution. Like part of the thing that made the web great, like if you talk about the late 90s, you could just view source and see what's out there. Like, or if you're looking at CSS, you could just like, before CSS, you just had style tags, right? And the thing is, it evolved over time, and what the problem was, here's where the problem was, is that there's this declarative nature of the web. Like the web is, you send it up some strings, and it takes that declarative syntax, which is HTML and CSS, they're declarative. You say, this is what I want the page to look like, and then it's up to the engine underneath to do the work. That's great. The problem is that if you go and try to do something that's a full game loop, at the time when the spas and stuff were coming up, everything was per thread. Like if you sent a request to the server, you get your own thread. Like this is how Apache worked and all that stuff. The deep knowledge on green threads and doing fast context switching, all that stuff wasn't really there at the language levels. So it was slow to do stuff. So then basically they're like, well, I want to do interesting drop downs and like I want to make my stuff more interactive. So they went down this thing of like, well, look, I'm going to make my own whole world of like interactivity because I can't rely on the server to get back to me in time, right? So there's a reason why all this evolved. It's not just like people being belligerent. It's that it slowly evolved, and it's been one of those situations where it's the frog boiling in the water thing, where it's just gotten worse and gotten worse and gotten worse and gotten worse to the point where it's like all this time the declarative hypermedia nature is the best part of the web, and it's basically been hidden behind a layer of JavaScript bullshit. Like I don't know how else to say it. Like the interesting thing is that it'd be like if you had Lua in your game engine, right? And you're like, like, hey, I don't want to go talk to the developer at all, so I'm going to build my own like syscalls inside of here that emulate the calls that then go like it's sometimes there's even an immediate mode inside of that version that people did. Like, it's crazy town. It's just because people didn't talk to each other or look at holistically at the problem. Like, that's how we got here. And the real funny part about all of this is that the job of a JS framework or any web stuff is just to take strings and give it to the browser as fast as possible. That is the whole problem. That's it.
Yeah, and instead, maybe people for context or history lesson have no idea that, because now if you just want to start a web app, you will be like, oh, create this React app, and like you don't think about what else could it be, right? Like there is a whole hypermedia system in every browser that is designed to replace the HTML tags and update your DOM and talk through server and client to have this connection and then do this as fast as possible. And like browsers have ton of code now to handle this, as for example, text and everything else, to render it nicely, properly, as fast as possible. And it's not used when you're doing like a huge SPA, like single page application with ton of JavaScript that is attempting to do everything that browser is already doing, but now in the layer of this like emulating JavaScript.
Well, and I can't even, I mean, you'll see me throw stones because I'm also the one who like was an idiot for the longest time. Like, I am part of the problem, right? Like, part of me was like, oh, I just use the web. I kind of understand the basics of it. But it wasn't until maybe the last 4 years where I all of a sudden got like really caring about how all this works. So I just was like, oh, well, React and Vue and all, like, Angular, these are by big companies that understand what they're doing. They know the best. Like, this is the best of class. Like, this is, you know, this is what's out there. Like, just, I have other problems to solve, I'll go solve them. And it wasn't until not too long ago that I really got like, okay, why is it like this? Like, what am I missing? Like, this seems really complicated. And so I actually went and made a whole, there's a Phoenix Live View, which basically is a way to do WebSockets, to do diffing between, you basically keep state on your server and you do a diff and you send down this little packet of data in a JSON and then it updates the UI. So I had seen that. And I said, hey, I write quite a bit in Go. I think I could write a better version of this. I think I could write a binary version and do like interesting ideas because it's in Elixir. It was really, really good. So I made this thing called Go Racer, and I worked on it for quite a while because I was like, hey, I just need to get stuff to the browser faster, right? Like, I need to understand, like, do these diffing and all that. And then I spent a year or so on that, and then I realized that it's just a dead end. It's just a complete dead end. And I can get into the weeds of why, but it's interesting because I was like, okay, throw it away. Like, we're just going to throw that away because it just will not work. It does not work at scale. It has all these issues, and it's great for a demo. You can show it off really easily, but it doesn't work like with contention and with the diffing is a ton of work. All these reasons. And then I started looking at what are the alternatives to this because I want to go fast. I'm doing millions of things. I'm trying to understand the binary, like what is the best way. And then, ironically, I started doing numbers on the HTMX stuff, right? So people that don't know, HTMX is just a way to basically do polling in a kind of smarter way on the page, but it's going back to the web of the 2000s. So I kind of went that way, and then it was beating my numbers of me doing all this crazy diffing and binary stuff and Go, and I was like, wait a second, like, what is going on here? Like, what have we forgotten? So that's kind of started me down the having my own framework, because I started going, I already had kind of a framework and I saw it didn't work. And unlike most JS developers, I was like, okay, I'm not going to go down that road anymore. I'm not going to keep trying to iterate on it to make it better. I need a new paradigm shift.
You needed one more package, you know? You needed like React dash whatever, dash router, dash like the React router to use the React like JavaScript to do the routing, which is in browser, is just insane. It's just insane. Yeah.
Well, and that's kind of where, so there's the Carson Gross and there's two other authors made this book called Hypermedia Systems. And the first half of the book is not only like it's basically a reintroduction to like what hypermedia is about. And we can get into the weeds of what it is, but the idea is that you don't have versions. You only are allowed to do what's next. It kind of comes from the HyperCard thing of like, you get a state, which is the view that you get to see, and then you basically have links and clickable things that say, this is the next thing I can do. So perfect example, when you go to your banking website, the only things you can do is log in. Once you hit log in, then you can see everything about your page. But if you hit refresh, there's no APIs or versioning. It's just literally, here's what you're allowed to do next. So to choose your own adventure, and it's also declarative so that when you're changing out elements, the engine can actually decide what it can reuse, what buffers they can do all kinds of really smart things so that you just declare, here's what I want the state to look like, and it does smart things underneath the hood to make that happen. So the first half of the Hypermedia book is absolutely amazing, and then it turns into an HTMX tutorial, and it's like, okay, this is kind of specific domain knowledge, but the first half is like trying to get your head wrapped around the ideas of Hypermedia. So anyone that's interested in this stuff, I highly recommend. But given my background and like how I'm used to doing really high performance stuff, like things that are basically like running into GPU bugs in the browsers, like that kind of level stuff, HTMX wasn't good enough. It basically started falling over, and I basically said, hey, there's a bunch of issues that I'm finding here, and so I said we should probably move to TypeScript, which I don't love, but we can go into like that later. But I wanted to fix all these issues, and they basically said, no, we're happy kind of the way it is. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to go, because some of the stuff was, they made some choices that I think were fundamentally just wrong. And the way that HTMX is written, you can add to it, but you can't take stuff away, right? So there's like 4,000 lines of JavaScript, and then you can add more to it. And I'm like, no. So basically what happened is I tried to rewrite it originally to be like, we need a plugin system. We need to think of like almost like an ECS style, where it's like, look, there's these systems and plugins, and then you start from basically 300 line thing to hook things up, and then everything else is a plugin, right? So if something's wrong, we can rip it out and put a new one in, and not delete the entire web to do it or have to install the world. We can just move that couple of K in or out, just like a regular game engine or anything like that. Like think about services, think about middlewares, that kind of thing. And that was not taken well, and said, no, we don't want that. So like that started me saying, okay, well, we need to solve this. And yeah, then we did. So for people that don't know what Datastar is, it does everything that HTMX and things like Alpine do. And it has the fastest signals library. It's the fastest morphing strategy. It is the fastest way to build basically any web thing, and it's 10 kilobytes. It has no dependencies. We don't even put our stuff up on Node. We don't use any of that stuff. In fact, we don't install Node or npm at all. It doesn't exist in Datastar. Just is unnecessary.
So for somebody who would have like zero idea how Datastar looks like and what you can do with it, like what's the core philosophy? How would you outline it?
So the core philosophy is let us like follow the specs and let it be okay to be wrong. And what I mean by that is there's a lot of frameworks that put their own custom tags and stuff. Like you'd have an element in the page and then you add these custom tags. The problem is almost none of them actually follow the spec. There's already a spec built into HTML called data-star attributes. So you can imagine where Datastar got its name, because if you just use the thing that's built into the spec. Well, the problem is people will use these outside elements, and they're like, YOLO, I don't care. But what if you're writing, the problem is if you're writing a browser and you're like, look, I built you a specific place that I actually know that this is an insertion mode map that does it, blah, blah, blah. Like they built into the spec a specific place. So there's probably fast pass in there. There's all these things that you can do when you follow the spec. So like all of a sudden validators work correctly. Like anyone that's doing firewalls or anything in between can look at the content and say, oh, this is valid HTML, right? So follow the spec even when it sucks. Like it doesn't matter. Like at least we all agree, right? Like you got to pick your poison. So follow the spec. And the other thing is everything in Datastar is a plugin. Literally everything. Like people know us for the SSE and the streaming and all that fast stuff. But my thing is, if you disagree with that, okay, then take it out. Just rip that out, and you can still use all the other concepts involved. So really all I did is took this Datastar attribute that's out there and made it so that we can make reactive expressions from them, which isn't built into JavaScript, even though it should be. And that's it. I just fixed like the one thing that was not in the spec, and then the rest is just a few plugins. So when we ship Datastar, when you see Datastar on the website, it's 10 kilobytes, right? 10.7-ish. But the actual engine is like 3. So the reason why we are the fastest is because we actually rely on the browser to do its job. Like it is in C and C++ or Rust, depending on the browser. And the fastest thing you can do is not do JavaScript. So don't do JavaScript. Like, it's not that hard. Like, it's really shocking. And this is the thing that I think it's kind of hard for people to realize. Like, if you're used to normal web, anyone that's here that's had to do normal web stuff, like you create a API, the backend sends JSON, right? It goes to the browser. That gets converted into a virtual DOM, usually. And then that gets diffed into a change, and then that gets updated into the DOM, right? The Datastar way is you create some HTML in your backend, and for us, you can even do it like an individual row because we can update parts of the page. You can just say this row from the database. When you step like in SQLite, you just do the next step, and you just take your row and render it as a template and send it as a new patch in one line. So you just send it immediately. And the browser is really good at taking strings, it's called HTML, and turning them into pages. So the thing is, I think people have lost the plot in that the fastest thing you can possibly do is give the browser some text. That is the fastest thing. There's nothing faster than that in the browser. Like, there's just not. It's just like saying, I'm going to try to hand a ORM to SQLite or to Postgres. It doesn't make any sense. You're like, no, I still have to send a string. Like, it will do its own calculations. It will do its own thing. And they've said, well, I'm going to make my own engine inside of my SQL that then does like crazy things instead of just sending the SQL that they need to run. It's bonkers. So the irony is that it takes someone that kind of hates JavaScript to write a JavaScript engine that's actually performant, because it's like, what are you guys doing? Like, this isn't, it's not that hard. I just don't understand it. Like, it's a weird situation to be in, right?
I like that, like, Datastar is basically you having JavaScript code to actually realize already existing tags or attributes, Datastar attributes in the spec of HTML. So like, yep, this already existed, browser already existed, and you're like, glue, yeah, and it works.
Well, and the thing is that when I talk about reactive expressions, what I'm talking about with that is there is kind of like when you do Excel, right? Like, you can put in the cells, you can put 1, 2, 3, 4, but it becomes, the reason why it's so powerful is you can start making formulas that say, hey, A1 is B2 times 2, right? That kind of thing, and you say equal and sum. That's setting up relationships. So instead of doing a procedural thing of saying, you're declaring what you want the final results to be. All Datastar is doing is taking that Datastar thing and saying, I want to be able to declare that this signal can tie to this thing, and then when this updates, it'll automatically update and do the right dependency graph and like that part. But to the outside person, they just get a declarative. We added a little bit more declarativeness to the HTML. And then when you do that, basically all JavaScript goes away. So the only JavaScript you need to run on most pages is what's already been declarative inside of Datastar. So we are orders of magnitude faster than most things. And here's the other thing: it's not just about being the fastest, because it's just JavaScript. Like, we're fast because we're not using it. But the other thing is, a lot of times, for example, with the live view thing, they're trying to do deltas and compressions and try to like be clever in the back end to try to send stuff to the front end. What we found, which is very unintuitive, is that in modern browsers you have the idea of windowed compression. Okay. So like Brotli or ZStandard, these are built into the browser nowadays, and they can basically say, not only can you compress a content down, like compress a packet, but you can actually compress a stream of data as you're sending it. So if it sees something in the stream, it'll actually like compress on the fly. It's really, really neat stuff. And the reason why that's so cool is that built into the browser at the C level is Brotli and ZStandard dictionaries that actually have all the HTML stuff already figured out. They have dictionaries of like these lookup tables. So if you just stream down HTML, it compress, like usually when you compress something with text encoding, you get like 4-to-1 compression. We get between 40 and 6,000 to 1 compression. And the reason why is because most of the time, instead of just making a request and then getting a reply, right? That's the normal, like you're used to just polling for the web. On most of our pages, you open up a connection and you just start streaming down the changes from the back end. And since most of the time, most of them are basically roughly the same, they compress crazy well because they're already in your window. And it means that the diffing algorithm is already built into the browser and it's already built into the spec. So instead of trying to write one in JavaScript or in Go and Zig, and like, just use what's already there. Most of the things that are clever in Datastar are just using what's already there. That's it. And it's shocking to me that people... the thing is, I didn't work on Datastar for so long because I was like, someone's got to figure that out. There's got to be like a caveat here that makes it so it doesn't work, right? There just has to be. A perfect example. So one of our... one of the people that's well known in the community made a demo that was his take on, if you've seen A Million Checkboxes, it came out a few years ago. And the guy actually turned it off for quite a while because it was too expensive to run, right? It would just cost too much to run the service. And he talked about how you had to have these Reddit instances, you had to do all this stuff, right, to make it work. One of the guys in our community made a billion checkbox version, runs it. It actually has 16 colors, so it's not just an on-off. It's actually like 16 times more data. Is a global shared view, virtual scrolling, all that stuff, 10 kilobytes of JavaScript on the page, and it runs on a potato. Like, he runs it on his blog site, like it's like with his other demos and stuff going on. And it's been on top of Hacker News, it's been the top thing, and it's 400 lines of Clojure script. It's not even in a compiled language. It's in Clojure. Like, it's in a scripting language, and it just works. And that gets around between usually around 40x, not 4x, so 4,000% compression.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. So it's weird to be having having a conversation with this stuff. So the irony is that I am really interested in other people that listen to this podcast in that they care about performance, they care about like finding the actual, like solving the actual problems. The problem I've seen is that if I try to talk to JavaScript developers about this, it is so different from what they're used to that they basically just yeet out. Like, they don't even try to engage with the actual problem.
You know, I think also they would have to change a lot in their mindset and like what they're used to and what they like. What's generally the response across the board when you talk about Datastar to other people? Because there must be some positive.
Oh, the thing is that there's been a lot of positive, but in a weird way. Like, people that are solving hard problems absolutely love it. Like, it's being used for military stuff right now. The David Nolan, who is the guy behind Clojure script, and he's also like one of the guys who made React popular back in the day because he showed it could be fast. If you basically use should component update and you completely ignore the entire renderer, you can make React fast. Like, ironically, that's people took it as React is fast instead of like, hey, if you avoid all this stuff, React is fast, right? But they've been using it for their startup. Like, people that are locked in and care about things, 100% love it. Like, we don't get a lot of people like downgrading it. The problem is you get JavaScript people who want to bash it completely or completely dismiss it. I know some well-known dev Twitter and JavaScript framework people that just will not engage. Like, if you say, here's the metrics, here's the numbers, here's the things, they basically go like, oh, that doesn't count. It's weird. It's because a lot of times they'll say, well, I want to run Next or Nuxt or all that because they want a full stack JavaScript, like they have a full stack framework that's JavaScript on the front end, JavaScript on the back end. The thing is, they think we're not playing fair because like I use Go, and I think Go is a slow language, but it's like faster than your network most of the time, so it's convenient. But like I want to redo some stuff in Zig and Odin, but like they like even Go, they're saying, well, it's not fair. You can't compare these two. It's like, but the problem is sending strings to the browser. Who cares about like which like vibes? Like I care about getting the strings into the browser efficiently as possible. Like, so they won't even engage with certain things. Like there's a JavaScript framework website that basically does benchmarks across hundreds of frameworks. But the problem is, for example, they completely fake the data in the front end before they run the test. It's like, okay, but then you're just testing your version of
execution.
Yeah, your JavaScript execution instead of the actual problem, which is getting strings into the browser. Like that is the problem, and every test of every framework is completely like bonkers. Like it does not solve that problem at all. Like, And even the problem it does solve, which is the reactivity part, guess what? We have the fastest one. Like,
Oh, really?
And yeah, so what's interesting is I had a version that had all these static dependencies and stuff, and it was by far the fastest one, by far. But what was interesting is we had a thing of like, hey, we just did the test on this part, like what's called signal, like a signal library, and we had the fastest one by a lot, by like 100x, and it was shocking. And so we used their test against their stuff and like, hey, ours is better. Come to find out, there was basically a no-op in the test, the way we were doing it, that didn't, like, it basically didn't count against the benchmark. That's why we're getting such huge numbers. But the fastest one in the JavaScript world is called alien signals. And the author came in and said, I think your numbers are wrong. And I'm like, great. Like, there's no ego. It's like, okay, like, that's probably right. So let's get through the weeds. Not only, the great news about that is that not only did our tests come out better, we were still faster, but the alien signal guy actually, his got faster because he saw the tricks we were doing, and now we use that version. So, like, it's one of those weird things where instead of saying, hey, there's animosity, or like, just walk away, like, oh, these are so much faster, we engage. We're like, if we're wrong, tell us. Great. But most people aren't willing to do that. So that's a success story for us, is that we have the fastest one. We work with the Turbo team and some of the HTMX people on the morphing strategy, but we still have the fastest one in the world right now. So we care about performance, but we also try to worry about this so that you don't have to. It's that kind of a dichotomy. Like, we really care about this, but if you just use it, you can just use it in C or any other language, and it's basically the same thing.
Okay. What would you then say to a person that would like to learn Datastar and generally learn this hypermedia approach to browsers that got lost in, I don't know, maybe 2000s? Where would they go? Where would they start? How would they think?
So I do think that the first half of the Hypermedia Systems book, it's hypermedia.systems, I think is the website. That's a great read. Like, it really does get you kind of locked in on what hypermedia is and what REST really means, because I think that's important. And then honestly, the Datastar website, it's data-star.dev. We have a guide that steps you through each step of kind of how to do it. And then the other thing is, like, just start writing the code. Like, if in some ways, if you don't have a web background, Datastar is going to feel very much like, well, I don't get it. What's the big deal? Because the irony is that it gets out of your way so quickly, you just solve your problem in the backend language. Like, for example, we have SDKs in 14 different languages, or 15, but an SDK to us is 3 functions. So you implement these 3 functions, and most of the time you only need one of them, and you're done. But because we define those, you're now set up for success in a way so that we have a community with Zig and Rust and Ruby and Scala, Clojure, all these different languages, and we all talk the same. We all talk about hypermedia, and we all talk about, like, how to send data. So the irony is the Datastar community is very cued into, like, language doesn't matter as much as algorithm. So I would say go to the thing, and definitely our Discord is very varied in the kind of people that are there, but in general, everyone cares about, like, performance and doing the right thing. Because you also find out that, like, hey, you can be in Python and beat most people that are writing, like, average Go sites or something, right? Like, it really is about algorithms for the most part, until you get into multi-threading and all that stuff. But, like, it's shocking how, if you read the guide and you try the examples and you just try it, you'll probably fall in love with it. It's more that people have that, it's so different, and it makes, it's almost like people get really upset that they have, everything they've learned is just a lie. Like, it just,
Yeah.
like, that's the problem. It's kind of like, you were talking to Ben from doing the WASM stuff, right? And I think, like, you were talking about, like, the things that people wish they had was, like, being able to interact directly with the DOM, right? If I could do that, I guarantee you I would rewrite Datastar today in C or Zig or something, right? Or Odin. Those would be 100% there, but it's not there. So the irony is that TypeScript is actually the fastest approach to getting stuff from strings into the browser. So, like, even WASM won't help us here. So, like, it's more about, like, not being comfortable and just trying it. Like, try it with an open mind, and prove us wrong when it comes to the actual metrics. Because I've dealt with some pretty strong personalities on Twitter and all that. And what's funny is, as soon as I show real numbers instead of like vibes or like, oh, what about a team of 100 people or 1,000 people? Like, why do you need that many? Like, just if you build it this way, you don't need that many. They all of a sudden either completely disengage or talk about vibes. They never bring up metrics. So that's one of those things that's like the Handmade Hero Network stuff says that there's a lot of there's a lot of fashion. The problem is that the web, it's even more so. Like, people skate by on just having terrible stuff. And it's weird because it's a bigger problem there. It's kind of like when you're dealing with embedded devices, like small little changes in your code make a huge difference, right? So when you're dealing with a scripting language, you really have to care. And the fact that people don't care, it's a weird thing. Like, I don't know how to, that's something that I've just kind of given up on trying to convince people. I just like, if you try it, we will beat your numbers. I make a guarantee that anyone that comes to our site, we will be able to recreate any demo that you have, but you better be ready to recreate one of ours.
Yeah,
that's my challenge.
You need to like first start measuring to actually know how much time it takes, right? Like, often from what I see, like, you don't measure. Like, if you don't measure, then like we don't even talk. Like, why are we talking about like speed if you don't measure, right? Like, it just
it gets even worse than that. Yeah, it's worse than that, because what they'll do is they'll measure their machine. Like, most benchmarks for most frameworks, especially in the web world, they're like testing like the raw connection speed of their thing, but they don't think at all about contention, right? Like, so a bun or a node backend in Next or Nux or something, it'll be about half the speed of the Go stuff when you have a single server with a single request response. But as soon as you start saying, I'm throwing 500 active connections or I'm throwing 10,000 active connections, it tanks. It just falls apart, right? So it's not built with that in mind. And like, that's the problem, is they don't want to engage with it because it doesn't fit the narrative of like, well, I'm a JavaScript framework. Like, no, you're a person getting strings to the browser. Like, that's all you are. So like, why do we care that it's written in JavaScript or not JavaScript? Like, that's just vibes. And I'm so done with that as a proposition of like caring about like, oh, well, I didn't learn this. So, okay, we'll learn. Like, you can make it better.
Do you know of any stories where somebody had like a React app and underwent like a huge migration to Datastar, like a sizable proportion?
Yeah.
What were the learnings? Like, how it happened?
So there's a talk coming out. It's not out yet. Hopefully in the next couple days from the Clojure conference, where there's a team that basically went from, they were making what should be, because people always talk about what Datastar can't do, and they've so far always been wrong. The only thing that I've ever seen be a bad fit is making browser extensions, because it's kind of like its own little self-contained thing, and you don't really talk out to the world. Like, you could make it work, but like, I don't care about that. So, but they took basically, people say, oh, you can't do maps, you can't do like Excel or like Sheets, like Google Sheet type stuff, right? Well, ironically, this company that basically did their version of QuickBooks with Google Sheets and stuff fully integrated and all that stuff, guess what? They went from a React app and went to a Datastar app. Their startup times, I forget if it's 30 or 300x what it was. Their general savings is like 40x less network for like live acting, and they basically have no latency like they had before. Like, they're at like a couple of microseconds above what the general latency of the connection is. So like, it's cheaper to run, it's faster, and they did it with a small team of like not web people, basically people that are closurists that are able to now work in the language of choice. And my thing is like, imagine if like WASM is really interesting, especially for like straight WebGL stuff, but imagine if you have someone like Casey or Gingerbell or something like that like was able to make stuff for the web in the languages that they want to. Like, how great would that be? And that's literally all Datastar is. It's like, you are now a full stack developer in the language of your choice, and you can actually use the browser for what it's good at. And guess what? It's pretty damn fast if you do that.
Nice. Do you know of like whether they rebuild this application from scratch, or do they try to like attempt like in-place migration bit by bit?
So the problem that you can do that, the issue is it's kind of one of those things where even in game dev, you always have to ask, okay, who owns the main loop? Like if some game engines, like you have to give up the main loop, like Unity, perfect example. You do not own the loop. You do not say, next step kind of thing. Like you are held to whatever they're doing. So most of the time, the problem is React and all those things said, YOLO, hold my beer. And they said, okay, I'm going to own the loop instead of the browser, right? So it's more, you have to try to find a route or some place in their crazy client libraries to basically say, okay, we're going to start on this part. The irony is that Datastar is the opposite. Like we let the browser control the loop. We don't get involved with that at all. We use mutation observers and other things to like see what's happening, but we don't try to control it. So brownfielding, it's actually really good because it's the size. It's like a third the size of the client router for React. So you could just sneak it in and call it like React dash attributes, and no one would even notice, right? So you can get it in there and start making changes. But my thing is more, it's not a JavaScript framework of the week. It's not like Svelte and Vue and React and Mithril and Solid and all these are just fundamentally flawed. They're just like SPA is anti-hypermedia. It is recreating all of the stack of the browser in the browser. Like that is madness. And so they are completely broken as a concept. So saying, oh, I'm going to slightly make it less worse. Like, no, just make a static page and start adding dynamic content to each thing. Like that is the easier route, but that's not always what people can do. So brownfielding is always hard, but it's especially hard when it's like saying, oh, can we brownfield, like changing out Unity to Raylib? It's like, okay, it's just a fundamentally different thing. So I would recommend, unless you absolutely have to, don't. And the irony is you might see that all of a sudden redoing a Datastar takes less work than just like change one page at a time. And you'll see that it goes a lot faster in general.
Yeah, that's yeah. Now, we talked a little bit about Datastar as a concept and like how it works. Do you want to highlight some of the features, for example, the SSE events and some of the things that people would not be like immediately familiar when they see a framework targeting the web?
Right.
I'm trying to do like not JS framework, but like framework targeting the web.
It's accurate because it almost sounds like I'm like a WASM thing or something, right? But it's just targeting the browser. So we have all the things that you're kind of used to seeing. Like you can hook up a signal, you can create signals, which is a reactive thing. You can hook them into any attribute. You can also listen to any event and say like stuff that instead of trying to recreate the stuff, there's already an event system in the browser. So data on : mouse up. Okay, now you have a reactive expression that happens when that happens. So there's those kinds of things. It has all the things that you would expect in a front end. Like the 10 kilobyte thing is everything we think you should use to make websites. So that's it. There's not like this extra thing is that you have to add on the React router and React router. Like no, we make that version that has basically everything you need. The one that is different for most people is most people think of the web as this kind of archaic. You have some stuff on your change, and then you go do a fetch or a pull, and you get new data, and you fetch and pull and fetch and pull. And so there's a built-in latency involved with that, right? So you're talking at least 30 milliseconds on, like in a general sense. One of the things that we built in is the idea of you can take any reactive expression and you can use these actions. And actions are just functions that have all this reactivity kind of built in, is like this reactive expressions built in well. And one of them is just get, post, put, and patch. So you just can do this thing that sets up an SSE connection. And all SSE is, people like think it's like WebSockets or like anything else that's like complicated, but it's literally, instead of sending text.-html in the header, you're sending text event stream. And it's just something that looks very similar to HTML that just says, hey, here's the event type, here's the ID that I used, and here's the data. And then there's new lines. So 2 new lines means I'm done with this part, flush it. That's it. Like that is the entire spec. It's just like a couple of new lines with your data. Well, we just took advantage of that and said, hey, you might want to update signals on the page. You might want to update elements on the page. or you might want to. That's it. Because I remember I said there's 3 functions. So either you update signals on the page or you update elements on the page. Okay, that's all it is. So we have these 2 different things that you send down. And the interesting thing is that it's just normal HTML. It's just saying, instead of waiting for the whole page to load, you're basically starting to load the stream immediately. Well, what's interesting about that is that you can basically keep that connection open. And open connections don't cost a lot on the battery or on the open connection. It's a read-side connection. So it's very cheap to keep that open. So if you have an event-based system in the backend that says, hey, when a new thing happens, send down a new version of that page, you don't have to recreate the connection. You don't have to do stuff. You don't have to do a request reply. So now all of a sudden, instead of sending something every 1 second or every 5 seconds, you literally have it in microseconds from when that sent to where you're flushing the buffer. Because it's just a network buffer thing that's happening, right? So all of a sudden, you're using sometimes hundreds of times less data just because you're not polling all the time, right? Like, now that's better. And then you say, okay, well, then each time I do send something, I'm getting like 40x compression on the thing I'm sending. Okay, that's better. So now you're at 40,000x of what like your normal React app is in practice. So it's the idea that like you just, instead of recreating this work every time, you just keep things open. So the way I look at it is you create a multi-page app just like you used to do in the 2000s. Like you create a URL with a resource, and then you keep an updated connection to that resource, so that as things change in the back end, you automatically get to see the view and everyone gets to see the same view at the same time. So it's impossible to get out of sync with each other because the server's in control, not the front end. But there are times when there's things like HTMX kind of work like this, but they don't do the streaming. They're moving towards that. But the other thing is that there's some state that most state lives in the back end, right? Like that's your source of truth. But there are some state, like when you're typing in something, or like having controls of scroll and all that do live in the front end. So you need that to be fast. So that's where the signals come in. So it's not about like only the server's in control or only the client's in control. No, just put state in the right place. Like that's it. Like that's all that's the magic to Datastar, is just put state in the right place, and all of a sudden our APIs are smaller. So if you're coming from React or HTMX or any other framework, I guarantee you will use less code and it will be faster. I have yet to be proven wrong after doing this for years. It's never, not single once happened. So like we can get into the details of each individual plugin and all that, but like the thing is that just follow the guide, just try it out, and don't try to use every feature of it. Just use the features that you need. It's kind of like when people learn about design patterns in school, or like the Gang of Four design pattern book, and they're like, hey, use 20 of these patterns to make a website. And you're like, that's the dumbest way to do it. Like, only use Datastar when you're like, hey, I want this to be a little bit more interactive. Hey, I want to make this dynamic. Like, until then, you should just be making a normal static site until you have content. So I know I'm not selling it very much because it's like, it should just get out of your way.
The guide also is super manageable, and like it's not that long. Like it's not like an entire read. I read it through and it's sort of like, wait, this is the end? Like, because it's like, you got to the end. I'm like, whoa, okay, that was fast.
No, the irony is that that's all you need to make the most dynamic, fastest things in the world. And the problem is that people go, like, we had the billion checkbox thing, and people are like, oh, okay, well, but do you have this example of a CRUD app? And I'm like, okay, if you can do this, like, people just don't have it in their mind. So like, yeah, we made a Kanban thing and it was faster. And the irony is there was a kind of a JavaScript Kanban thing, and the Go one, of course, was faster. But the irony is that it's written in Go, which is not a terse language, and it was about half the size in code than the React one. Like, it's just crazy that it's like, even in your own playground, we're murking you. Like, you're not even doing good in your own backyard. Like that's a problem, right? And people don't want to engage with it because it goes against their ideals in a way. Like, there's no way that some like lower level language can be less code, because it works against their whole ethos, right? Like, I don't know how to have that conversation then.
Why do you think HTMX and Datastar like happened now? Like, there was a period of time that like people started doing, like, after Google Maps, I think, like the SPAs and just like throw everything in JavaScript, and it was like either you choose React or Angular, and that was it, right? Like maybe Backbone in today, but like that's it. And now it's either HTMX or Datastar as a more advanced version and more featureful. Why now?
I think it's just the boiling frog thing of like it just got so hot, it just got so bad, and that so many things, like the fact that there's CVEs for like JavaScript now, like major 10 CVEs against React that have been coming out. I think that's just it's kind of come to the end. The other thing is that it just depends on what your approach is. Like there are definitely downsides to doing HTMX. Like the problem is it's so much simpler than React, but there's a limit to what you can do, right? It doesn't handle front side reactivity very well. It's not the fastest, but it's faster than doing a bunch of crap in React, but it's still not that fast, right? So there's certain limits of what it can do. So the problem is that I said, okay, like what if you just don't have that part? See, like there's nothing wrong with the HTMX thing. Like if it works for you, that's great. But I don't want to have a limit. I want to basically be able to use the browser to its full extent. It'd be kind of like having to, like if you were using the headers for GLSL, like the ES version, like the mobile phone version, when you're on the desktop. Like, why would I do that to myself? Like, why would I not use the extensions I know are there? Like that kind of thing. Like the way that it's built, it was basically to get us back to the 2000s. And I'm like, hey, the browsers can handle so much more than this. There's so many more interesting things here. We should be doing that. So they have different. The thing is, they started out at this kind of the same thing, but they're very different paradigms now. Like the difference between React to HTMX is almost the same difference between HTMX to Datastar. Like they are not the same anymore. Like they have very different ideals and performance profiles.
How Datastar looks like now as a product, meaning like the GitHub contributions, size of the team working on, how does it look like?
So right now we're at 3 core developers. One of them kind of fell off. That happens in open source sometimes, but it's basically me and Ben Croker, who ironically was one of the first contributors to HTMX, and said, hey, this doesn't quite do what I need it to do. So it's just the two of us are the core people. That occasionally people come in, but it's just the two of us. And a lot of it, the irony is that because it's so plugin based, Datastar hasn't really changed that much. Like there's been some syntax changes and like people kind of bike shedding on some of the details or some of the defaults. That's why it hasn't gone. We've been in RC for a while because it's like, okay, these are just a lot of opinions. So there's not a right one. It's just like, it's about the plugin. So the actual Datastar part's been done for like a long time. Like it's done. It's all the, like what plugins do we have as the defaults? That's it. So like you can not like any of Datastar and still use it. In fact, there's people that actively don't use our plugins and use their own thing because they just want to like play with plugins, right? So it's just the two of us, and that's fine because the thing is, there's not that much code. There's a lot of refinement of trying to be the smallest, the fastest. There's a bit of code golfing in there, like fighting against the JavaScript engine to be smaller and more performant. But there's only, it just enables you to make reactive expressions in the browser. Like, how many people need to be part of this? Like, it's just one of those things that just gets out of the way. I think if you've read the guide, but if you actually sat down and wrote stuff with it, almost guaranteed you're going to be like, that's it. I can just write in any language I want, front end and back end. Like, that's it. So the thing is that we've tried having people do PRs, but a lot of times when we see PRs, it's like, oh, you haven't thought it through, or oh, you haven't read the browser spec, but you have a good idea, let's go implement it. So we don't take a lot of PRs as is, but if people ask for stuff, like we'll just implement it ourselves because it's easier with the plugin system to be able to turn things on and off and have dependencies. Like it does all the right things so that it's easy to write that code. So in a lot of ways, the plugin system is more of an internal feature than it is like we don't yell to everyone, hey, come write every plugin in the world, come interface with us. It's like you probably don't need the plugin. And in fact, we have the pro version where we actively put stuff in there that are things we don't think you should use. So a little while back, when we were about to do the RC, we basically did kind of a sweeping thing of I basically for a while there was when the Datastar first came out, it literally was just, hey, here's 3 plugins and a document on how to write your own plugins. That's it. Because I was like, I only use 3 plugins, which is like Adder, Event, and I think one other one, like Signals. So I had 3 plugins because I'm like, this is all I need. Here's how you write things. But then I found out like people want a little bit more. They want these features and these plugins. So I just started writing plugins for everybody, right? Like everything that they would want. But then as we're getting to version 1, we basically said, okay, we have all these plugins, but we actively think these ones are bad ideas. So like the thing is we were going through that whole signal like triage thing of changing out the entire signal, like how it works under the hood, all this. So we rewrote the entire project. So we basically forked ourselves, right? We started from like this code base and we said, okay, we're going to start fresh. And we rewrote everything, but we decided like these things we don't want to support going forward. So what we did is we forked those as well, and we put them in a pro thing that says, hey, if you're going to do things we don't think are good ideas, you can like pay money to write bad code. So we put that in pro, and we actively tell people not to use it. A perfect example of this, like this is one of the things that people get really mad at us for doing this, because it's like, and also to be clear, the GitHub still has the old code. Like you can go use that. People have written community versions of these plugins, but we're like, oh, go ahead. Like, but we don't have to support it. We don't care. Like, go make bad software. Like, go ahead. But for example, the data persist. It basically uses local storage to save stuff to disk, so you can cache stuff off. Well, if you're being hypermedia focused and you're actually keeping state in the right place, that state should be on the server. It should be shared. It should be all this. So saving stuff locally is almost always a bad idea because you're actually working against the cache that's already built into the browser. Like, what are you doing? So, like, if you're doing that, then you must have a good reason to do it that, like, is an enterprisey level thing. Okay. We also have one like data replace URL, where you basically, people will modify in the SPA world, they'll modify the URL, right? They'll add parameters, they'll do all kinds of stuff and mess with history. Well, guess what? If you're updating your page at 144 frames per second, which we do, like, you will just, like, your entire history is now blown out, right? Like, you can do stupid things quickly, and it's like, why are you doing that instead of just going to a new URL and, like, updating a new page because it's a new resource you're on? Like, it's basically, it's people not grokking, like, what hypermedia is really about. So people got crazy angry that we're like, oh, we're now, like, pro, and you have to, like, buy into this, and now you can't get the real good features. And we did the opposite. We said, all the stuff that we think is terrible and that you're jank for using it, okay, you now have to pay for. And people got so angry about us gatekeeping, and we were rug pulling them because we weren't going to support this bad way anymore. And it's like, no, we'll support it, but, like, great, like, now your support burden, like, we're not going to do that. So, like, no, we got some pretty heavy vitriol for saying no and forking our own project and still keeping the other one. Like, you can use it, people do it, but, like, we're not supporting you. People don't like to be told that they're doing it wrong.
Yeah. It seems like that's a pattern that came up a couple of times in this conversation already. Like, yeah,
I mean, the thing is that it's one of those things of, like, provably wrong. Like, we can see your version and we'll see my version. My version will be faster with less code. And here, go look at the flame graphs. One person on Twitter, they're like, hey, there's an issue with Datastar and it's really slow on Safari for this example, blah, blah, blah. Come to find out, it was like a GPU issue because if you actually look at the flame graphs for Datastar, they're so thin that the GPU was causing the issue. Like, it was the rendering of the page that was causing the issue. And they were like saying, well, Datastar can't solve all the problems. It's like, who said it? Like, it just gets out of the way so much that your GPU is the problem? Like, that's pretty much solving the problem from my point of view. Like, if your GPU is your problem in your browser, that's a win in my opinion. So,
and you are in now like 1.0.0 RC version. So it's like 1.0 coming up.
Yeah, the 1.0, I was told by Ben before I came on the podcast, do not give hard dates. But I'm the thing is, all the things that, like, I barely look at the updates because they're just like changing a default or something like that, right? Like, it's that kind of thing where, unlike other frameworks, I don't care if we had to go to 2 or 3, but my thing is, unless the browser actively changes, like something changes in the browser, we're done. Like, the browser does what the browser does, and we can add plugins, but we don't need to take anything away. So I don't see any reason for 1.0 to, like, go away. Like there's nothing to do with it. So I'm hoping that happens very, very shortly, because I've been done for a long time. I don't think there has been a real change that would have been an actual bump or update in a year or more at this point. Like something that really actively changed. We had something where like instead of doing dashes, we did colons, and the irony, like there was something in the syntax that changed. And what was really funny is one of our users was like rule lawyering the rules lawyer, like at the D&D table. Like I was saying, hey, the spec says this, we can't do this. And he's like, actually, the spec says this in article B of this part of the spec. Like I was reading the rule wrong. And I'm like, oh, no, we can totally do this syntax change the way I wanted it to be in the very first place. So it's pretty funny that the only change that's happened was changing a dash to a colon. That's been the biggest change in Datastar.
This is also
a dash to a colon.
These are like the changes that will be most controversial. Everybody will have an opinion, like whether the colon and dashes, like, that's the meat of the discussion usually,
Yeah, and that's the funny thing is that's how, in some ways, Datastar has gotten boring, and I love it. I love that there's this, like, people just come on and say, hey, here's this cool thing. So there's a guy who's a podcaster that basically does a bunch of HTML stuff, and his hello world for doing stuff in Datastar was he rewrote basically Google Wave. I don't know if you remember that, like, I've ever seen that, but it was like a interactive way of sharing content. It was kind of like a chat thing, but also like a workspace that you could work in. And that was his hello world. And I'm like, okay, if this is your hello world, like then we're on to something, because it's so like you can make a real-time shared chat app in any language in an hour. Like once you have that unlocked, imagine what people can do with that. Like there's just a fundamental change in how you think about the problems. But again, the thing is, any place where Datastar doesn't make sense, the web doesn't make sense. Like I'm all about native apps. Like I'm fully on board making native apps, but it's a weird thing where people are trying to do this local first thing in the browsers, and I think they're so far off the mark. They completely misunderstand what a browser is, that they want to basically recreate the backend, like a native app, inside of the confines of the browser, and they're like they like recreate SQLite, and they run it as a WASM thing, and then tie their TypeScript into that, but they don't have control of mmap. So how are you going to do that? Like they haven't thought through the actual problem. But there's millions of dollars with big companies that are like doing things that you just look at and go, you have to be wrong. I used to think I was crazy, but like I also now have the fastest JavaScript framework in the world. Like I don't know what to say about that. Like,
when did you start working on Datastar? When did you start?
So I started working on the Go-Go Racer probably 3.5 years. I would say that it's been public for around 2.5 years. But the irony is that it hasn't changed. Like some of the syntax on the outside has changed, but the core idea is about 300 lines of JavaScript or TypeScript. And even that TypeScript, so that's an interesting thing, at least to me, is that when I first started talking to the HTMX community, I said, hey, we need to move to using TypeScript. And the reason why is because like JavaScript is a weird language in that it's dynamic, but it's also the DOM is very statically typed. Like it's like there are known types there, but the way you interact with it is in a dynamic language. But there's a bunch of things that were happening where we were doing checks or not doing checks in the HTMX code that basically was inferred, and then they'd have to check it at runtime to see, is it this type or is it some other type and stuff like that. Whereas if you use TypeScript, you can just do static analysis and know exactly where it is. And I got into all kinds of fights with people like, oh, we don't want to do that. We want to just do JavaScript. Like, we don't want to have a build step. We don't want to do all these things. And then the irony is I ported the whole thing over and showed, like, here's all the errors. We actually have all these issues. Luckily, over time, they've been fixing a lot of these things. But they're like, well, we don't want a build step. It's like, well, okay, like, ES build, which is what I use, is milliseconds or less. Like, it can be in the microseconds to do a build of this stuff. Okay, so if it takes milliseconds to do static analysis, how is this even a conversation? Like, it's faster than your frame rate of your monitor. That's not the real issue. And so, like, went and fixed all this code, did all these things, and then showed that it was not only smaller, it was faster, and it was more technically accurate. And basically it was told, like, yeah, we don't really care. Like, that to me is like, that's such a weird thing to do. And it's not like, again, you can't, I think there's a big issue that's happening right now where people just want to blame like the ecosystem, right? Like they just want to say like the ecosystem sucks. It's like, but the ecosystem is made of projects and people and ideas and like actual implementations. And people want to just kind of like hand wave on the details, and no one learns from that. One of the things that I learned from doing the circus stuff, and well, even more in doing that, like I had like Russian coaches that are like, if you better want to be there to like be better, right? Like you don't just like get told you're doing good. You have to like be good. One of the perfect examples of this I did some Aikido and stuff when I was like younger, and I was doing pretty good. I thought it was decent. I went to like a jiu-jitsu and judo, like when it gets to, I got bodied. And the thing is, I just did not have a concept of like how what I thought was the problem was not the problem, right? Like I had a fundamental misalignment of reality when it came to like what works and what doesn't work. And it was humbling in a great way. So when you like do jiu-jitsu or anything like that stuff, when you roll with somebody, you don't have an ego with it, because it's not, there's always gonna be someone better than you, and you're not fighting them, you're like fighting yourself. You're trying to be the better version of yourself. And they're just there to help you guide that. So there's a difference in mentality that I think is really missing in the web world of like this is not like we are the fastest thing. Prove me wrong, please. Because if you prove me wrong, it gets faster because you will find a flaw. That's great. You're finding a flaw in my technique. It will get better. And that is completely missing right now. And the only way that I think it gets better is if people that are listen to this podcast, that kind of performance-minded people go, oh, maybe I should do some stuff on the web. Maybe there is a silver lining here. That's the only way we make a difference. Because if the Datastar way becomes the norm, or someone that makes something better than that, like then we all win. We can now run websites on our phones. Like right now, a lot of websites, you don't want to run it on your phone because you're just going to burn up your battery. Guess what? You can watch a real-time text simulation thing at 144 frames per second on your phone on 3G with Datastar. Imagine what like smart people can do. Like I'm just a dumb guy from the circus. Like what are we doing?
Okay. Yeah. It's weird, it's weird that like this potential is there for years and no one is tapping into it. And especially like if you take high-tech companies, like Google owns Angular framework and Meta owns React framework. I mean, probably they have like foundations, but like they were the original authors. So they probably were interested in being the popular option. And also like, why wouldn't you want to have faster websites for all your products, right?
Yeah, well, there's a weird thing where everyone's trying to, when you go for clout instead of like solving the problem, there's a misalignment, right? Like people won't say this sucks or that this way is bad because they may drop in subscribers or they might be seen as like vitriolic. I get a lot of things where people say that I'm being childish for like saying like you're bad at your job. Like you are doing bad things. Like you will not back up. You have these opinions, but you won't back them up. And the fact that that's seen as okay, it's like this weird passive aggressive thing where like instead of actually talking about civility only works if you're actually talking at the same level, like you're actually talking about the problem, right? But if you're just saying, if you're using debate tricks instead of actually talking about the underlying problem, then civility breaks down. Like it just does not work. It's kind of like there's a guy that I really I love his work. Professor Dave, he makes fun of all the anti-vaccine people and the flat earthers and all this stuff. And he just doesn't try to sugarcoat it. He just say like, look, here's all the evidence. Here's all the things. These guys are idiots. And they're trying to like they don't have any actual data behind them. So they're using debate tactics instead of actually going at the issue. And I feel like until we normalize saying that like you don't have anything to back you up and you should look, like you almost have to embarrass someone before you can actually make it better. It's kind of like coming in and saying, I know super secret death touch. Like when I was growing up, like during the 80s and stuff, like there was a bunch of Kung Fu stuff, right? Like there's all this like magic woo stuff. And like MMA just stopped all of that. Like it just, once you saw what actually works in a ring and what doesn't work, because even like jiu-jitsu doesn't work all this. Like if you just roll on your back, like it only works in certain situations. Like you have to know a holistic thing. It just, that one thing does not solve the whole problem, right? I think we have to get back to a way of being able to say you're wrong without someone taking it as an affront to them. Like, I don't know how to do that.
And Andreas Fredriksson, who is a friend of Mike Acton and a colleague, he told me that like he used to ask people like, what problem are you solving? And it sort of like stopped them in their tracks, because like now it's like, okay, so what actually is the problem that you're solving, right? And now we start a discussion about the thing, not like hand wavy, but like, okay, narrow it down. Like, is this the problem? Like, really, what you're saying is the problem, or is it something else? And maybe that's like a somewhat less confrontational way to get to this point where somebody's like stepping back and like rethinking it. But you also mentioned like we shouldn't sugarcoat stuff. So tell me more about like what's your way of thinking about this?
I guess the thing is that there's a difference. Like when someone comes in and says, "Hey, we have this in our Discord all the time, where we'll have someone that comes in. Here's one of my pet peeves. Like when you come in, this has happened a couple times with different SPA developer people. They'll come in and say, "How do I do optimistic concurrency or optimistic updates?" Sorry, optimistic updates. And what an optimistic update is where, let's say you have a value that the person does and says, "Hey, I want to change this number from a 1 to a 5," right? So what you do is they change it from 1 to 5, and then they send off the request to the server, and if it gets changed in the back end, everything's fine. But if it gets an error, it undoes that change, right? So it goes back to the 1, right? The problem is that's just lying to the user, right? Like that is a fundamental lie. And what you're doing is you're telling them that it's in a state that it's not. And people are like, "Oh, what's the big deal?" It's because it's convenient for the developer to do, because you can just change it to a 5 and then the back end errors, and then you change it back to a 1. Like it's just a try, accept kind of thing. So it's easy for a developer to do, but the real answer is to put an indicator that says, "Hey, I'm working on trying to change this value." So you can instantly change an indicator to say, "Hey, I'm working on updating this value. Here's the new value," right? And so optimistic update is just straight up lying to the end user, and people treat it as if it's like you're a bad person because you're telling me that I shouldn't be able to do this. And I'm like, I will not. Irony is Datastar is probably the fastest thing in the world for doing optimistic update, but I literally say, I'm not helping you. You are not, literally you will get no help from us for that. And you are, and here's why. And you're a bad developer because you're lying to the user. And part of that is, if you're doing a native app, it might make more sense, because like let's say you're doing like the GGPO, right? Like you're doing a netcode where you're basically playing a game and you're saying, "Hey, I'm hitting this person," and then it may have to roll back and redo it, right? That semantic works perfectly fine if you're playing a fighting game. If you're doing a transaction with your bank or like signing a legal document, you want that state to match what the server, like everyone agrees to. So the problem is they take this idea of like, well, games do this. It's like, are you playing a game in the browser? Like even in the game situation, there's better ways to do that, right? There's like netcode with rollback is the right way to do that, not just to like change a value and say YOLO, like hopefully it works out. Like they fundamentally are wrong, and they get mad at you because you tell them they're being an idiot for even like having that mental model. Like they're wrong, and it does nothing but makes the world a worse place by them showing them how to do that. So my thing is, I don't care if Datastar is the most popular framework. I just care that people who are looking for a resource can actually find it. That's it. Like I just want to be well known enough that people that care find it. But I don't care about being popular. I don't want to be known as a JavaScript person. I don't want to go on the talk circuit or any of that stuff. I do, like, to me, I just want to fix these problems and get back to doing like normal development. Like that's it. Like I don't want it to be a thing. In fact, at all. Like I just want to walk off into the desert and be like, cool, I'm going to go do other projects. Like I can't wait for Datastar to be done and for people to forget that I even was part of it. Like that would be great.
Now, I talked to a person who said something interesting regarding the making new frameworks, that he started to think about how to optimize this so that LLMs started to suggest this framework meaning like there's a documentation that LLMs can read and like stuff like that. Mm-hmm. How do you think Datastar like does this on this? Like Datastar is a not common approach to make websites now, and more people will be getting this knowledge from LLMs. How, I know maybe it's not your goal, but ideally some people would be like, hey, you know what? Your LLM just suggested you to use Datastar over React.
Do you want me to curse or not?
Ideally not, but you already did. So
let's just say I have 0 F's to give to to trying to optimize for that.
Okay.
And the reason why is, here's the perfect to me, the LLM stuff and all that, it is a very interesting tool. It reminds me, I used to do construction when I was younger and stuff in the summers between circus gigs and stuff like that. And there's when you're doing like pavers and stuff, there's these giant tile saws that have they're basically chainsaws for like tiles. They're these ginormous things, and they're super handy. They're super convenient, but you don't hand it to the guy on their first day, right? You have to really know what you're doing. And LLMs are kind of like that in that they are an aggregator of information, but they don't do anything with taste. Like they'll tell you what's popular, right? But they won't tell you the thing. And for some things, like they can be really there's something about being able to interact with something. One of the things that Lisp people get really right is the REPL. And the idea of like you make some changes to your code, you get an update, and then you can modify your code in that cycle. The LLMs are really interesting in that regard. The problem that I've seen is that they're so overfit, it's scary. And what I mean by that is there's some researchers that are using Datastar right now because the entire thing is so tiny that it literally fits in any context, even the nano context or anything like that. So you can fit the entire code base in there and say, okay, now make me a website using these constructs. And you have all the tokens of the world left over to do stuff with. And Claude, Codex, all these things completely fail. So the thing is that they've been trained on a million examples of React, not good React, just what is the most popular way to do React? What's the most popular way to do things? So to me, we actively have in the Discord channel, we have an LLM mind prison channel where we're just like, take all your questions and take them there, because they can be a great tool, but they also are they're not a substitute for actually learning how to do stuff. Like they're great for aggregating information, but they're not good at actually understanding the concepts. And the thing is, Datastar is so small and gets out of the way so quickly that it's one of those things that LLMs are bad at, because there's not a lot of context to go on. Because there's on most pages, there's maybe 5, 6, even data-star things anywhere on the page. Like you don't need that many, so it doesn't have much to go on. And that's kind of how we like it. So I'm at the exact opposite end of the spectrum. I think LLMs have a lot of value, but for trying to learn how to use a framework or try to recommend it, I don't care at all about that. We actively don't want that, because the problem is if you get bad examples out in the wild of people making all kinds of crazy plugins or things that we disagree with, then it just makes it worse. Like the thing is, Datastar is such a small part of it's ironic that Datastar is kind of like a back-end framework that's agnostic to language, that has like a 10K shim. Like you're a full stack developer in any language you want with this tiny 10K shim to make it possible. And like Datastar is not the problem. Like your app is the problem. Your business logic is the problem. So I don't care about being popular. The thing is, over time, either Datastar or something very similar to it will win, because as soon as people kind of get glued into it, people are going to see how fast websites can be, how fast interactions can be. It is just orders of magnitude. Every time that I've taken something that was a React app or a Spa app or anything like that and turned it over, it's at least 30x faster. Like we live in a world, especially if you care about performance, where like 6 or 7% is a big deal. You shouldn't be able to get 40,000% of anything, let alone like 6%, right? Like that's a big win. And it just tells you that people are just on the wrong paradigm thing, and like we can fix it. So the thing I would say is like, just get in there and start, like, just because the web ecosystem sucks right now doesn't mean the web sucks. It doesn't mean that browsers suck. It doesn't mean that the platform sucks. It just, they got on this weird, you could say the same thing in Unity, right? Like Unity had the completely wrong version of the hierarchical model of how games work, right? Everything, like they're trying to match the scene graph to the actual like logical flow. They've done better stuff, like when Mike Acton came and he actually fixed a lot of those things. But the paradigm for years was completely broken, yet it was convenient, so people did it. Like, okay, well, you can't fix that. But if people care about it, then all of a sudden they'll start using the Raylibs or writing their own engine. Like, this is a solvable problem. And that's kind of where Datastar, for me, is at least. It's a pay it forward kind of thing where we want to fix it so that it's easy to fall into the pit of success. Like, if you use Raylib, for example, there's a good chance that you're going to make it performance. Or if you use Image GUI or any of these kind of things, there's a good chance that you're going to make a good app just because you have good defaults. Datastar's that way. I'm also in the middle of, I think, completely murdering what the approach that Tailwind has done. Like, that's coming up really soon. And I also have a thing for doing declarative components in this Rocket thing that I've just released. And all this is just to fix it so that you, like, a developer that doesn't, not every developer has to care about all this performance, but if they use these defaults, they're in a good place. Like, if you use Unreal and you use the baseline stuff, you're going to be in at least a good place to start making a game, right? Same kind of thing. Like, that's all we're trying to do, is make somewhat of an engine for the web to fix the things that just happen to not be included yet. But my hope is, over time, most of the stuff gets into the web. Like signals, there's a good chance that signals are going to be put into the web standard. Like, it'll be part of the JavaScript will have signals. And once that happens, guess what? Datastar gets a lot smaller. So that's great. Like, I can't wait till it disappears, right?
I think that's perfect. There's one last tiny question that I have. You now just mentioned what are you working on now? Can we do a bit of a shout out? What do you do now? What do you plan to do release maybe soon-ish?
Sure. So, I mean, at work, I work at Sane on a project called Nats, and I'm actively working right now on, ironically, trying to optimize speed between binary protocol stuff between servers right now. So anyone that uses Nats, hopefully it's going to get even faster and better in this next little bit. So I care about performance in lots of different places. When it comes to the Datastar stuff, Datastar is done. Like, if you want to, for your local version, rename it from the RC7 or whatever it is to 1.0, yeah, just to Datastar.js, it's going to be basically the same with maybe a slight default change. But like, it's, to my opinion, done. So that'll be coming out as soon as Ben says, like, okay, we're ready to go.
What do you mention about Tailwind now? Just a second ago.
Yeah, so the one thing that's Tailwind is this, like, it's been this really amazing project that came out when it made perfect sense for when it came out. So when it came out, it was trying to solve things that were wrong in the CSS. Basically, they had a really good design system. They're like, hey, how do we make this easy to use in CSS without putting sass and lass or less and sass and all these other things in the way? But since then, there's now nesting in CSS, there's functions coming, there's mix-ins, there's all these things that are now built into CSS. Has gotten a lot better since when Tailwind came out. So all I'm doing with this project is there's a project from Andy, I forget his last name, that was at Google, that's this thing called Open Props. So it's just a set of CSS variables. That's this nice design system. So instead of having like W2 as a class and having a million classes, you basically just make CSS and you say H1 and you use the variables that he gives you to basically have this nice design system. So you keep your CSS, shockingly, in CSS, and you have these nested structures so that you can actually make it really nice so that it feels really easy to use. The problem is it's a fixed design system. So Open Props is this great idea, but it's like, this is what size 6 is. Like, that's what it's defined as. It's not like configurable really and all that. What I did with Stellar CSS is I basically said, coming from doing 3D art, tools like Blender, Nuke, DaVinci Resolve, all of them have a parametric style where you basically can, or like a CAD CAM style where you have one thing that drives another thing that constrains another thing that drives another thing, that kind of style. So I was like, what if your entire editor and config is literally a live parametric thing, and then you're generating all the content live. So it's completely parametric, but you're still doing the low-level CSS stuff that is actually good. So basically, has all the benefits of Tailwind, but it's actually far more interesting to use, and then you get it's a lot faster and smaller and all the other things. So you get the best of both worlds. And the irony is that because the editor's written in Datastar, it's all live streaming, like everything's instantaneous. Like I'm changing entire views and all that because I have one streaming view for that page. And when you're editing, imagine if you had Tailwind and the config was editable and it was actively changing the website.
Oh, you have live view.
Yeah.
Like immediate mode style where you just drag something and you see it.
So it's even more than that. So you have the editor that's live, but you also can put a web component on your page that says basically connect me to the editor, because the executable that you run is also a web server, so it's running this. So you basically point it at your local server while you're doing your stuff, and it automatically binds and edits your site live with the things that you're doing in the editors. So you read the documentation, you play with the parameters. Not only does it change here, but it changes in your site. And there's things that are just fixing, like for example, color is usually a hard thing to do, right? Like you get a palette or like green 6. We'll take an image, extract all the colors in 16-bit space, do a bunch of calculations, create over 1,000 themes for you, and then export proper tone things with contrast controls and dimming and like all these things with charts, code highlighting, everything, and we do it in a millisecond.
Nice.
So yeah, it's basically, I'm just trying to solve the thing so I can get back to using the web. Like I don't want to use all of Node. And the thing is right now that tool, that Stellar thing is like for general usage, yeah, it's sub-second, but you also get to view it live. And then I think it's gonna be like a 10 meg binary. Like, so it's going to be decently small. It could be smaller if I read it in Odin and stuff like that. But the point is just solve the problem instead of living inside this crazy world that they have made for themselves. Like, for example, if people get really mad that we don't have NPM or Node anywhere in our project. So a lot of times in the web world, there's a thing called Vite, which is a bundler. Well, guess what? Under the hood, it uses ESBuild. Well, ESBuild is just a Go binary. Well, it also has, you can just call the library directly. So our website and even Stellar has built-in ESBuild natively. So we just call the thing directly as a library. So instead of going through like 6 layers, we just use the thing directly. So it's faster, right? Like, what's the way to make things fast? Do less of it. So, like, it doesn't have to be this hard, and yet people make it so hard. I don't understand.
At what state is Stellar CSS?
Yeah, Stellar CSS, it'll be part of the pro stuff. So again, what we found is that we have a full nonprofit. We have a 501c3 that we set up, and we have enterprise stuff that you can do. There's some stuff like there's a debug inspector that's actually, DevTools is not that good at SSE stuff, so we wrote our own set of tools that you can basically drop onto a page, and now you can see every event that's happening, every signal. You can edit it, all that kind of stuff. But Stellar is going to be one of those things where I think that might be the killer app for Datastar, in that it's such a paradigm shift in how you build stuff that it may be the thing that makes us big. But that's part of Pro too. One of the things that we saw with the Tailwind, I don't know how much you know about like the whole Tailwind debacle that's been going on, but
the AI related layoffs or what exactly?
Yeah, all the layoff stuff. The problem is that like everyone in the world used Tailwind, right?
Yeah.
And they were basically, everyone's like, well, that business model is they make a bunch of UI components. Well, the AI can take examples of things to make more examples. Like that's not the hard part. But they basically had a business model that was set up that even if Tailwind succeeds, the project itself, like the company behind it, doesn't succeed. Whereas the way the nonprofit is set up is that we have a pro license. It's a lifetime license, stuff like Stellar, Rocket, the inspector, all that stuff's in there, and also the bad plugins, the ones that shall not be named. The bad plugins are there too. There'll be some better. There are some good plugins, but most of the ones, like we have caveats that say do not use these. The thing is that all of these things together simplify your life so much that even if you just use Stellar, it'd be worth the price of admission just to simplify. Like you use it for one day, you've now paid for the lifetime license. And the hope is that if this becomes the way that people build things, then it becomes more popular. Then it might become sustainable in a way that open source just is not sustainable. So people pay for convenience. They don't pay for features. They don't pay for helping a nonprofit and all that stuff, they pay for convenience. So the idea is that we make that convenient so that we can then focus on the other stuff. So, but I'm planning to get that out very, very shortly. Like, I'm really hoping that a version of it is available to pro users before the month's over, even though Ben will get mad at me for saying that.
Okay.
So
This will take a couple of weeks to process and then schedule. So it might be then that once comes out, Stellar CSS is already available in Pro package.
Maybe hopefully, we'll see.
Okay. Delaney, thank you so much. This was awesome.
Oh, thank you, man. I really do appreciate it. I have to give a shout out. It feels weird to be on your podcast because I see really smart people and I'm like, dumb guy from the circus. Like, I do not feel like I belong to the group of people that you actually have on here. But my hope is that someone says, oh, maybe I need to give the web a second chance. Like, that's really all I hope for from this group. So, like, thanks for listening.
Perfect. I will stop the recording.